All right, we should be good. And welcome to another exciting episode of the Mando Method Podcast. I am your co-host, Armand Rosamilia.
And I'm the other co-host, Chuck Buda.
So we got another great author roundtable. I love doing these because you learn. It's like you learn from a couple of different people at the same time, and I love. We get a lot of interactions between all of us, and it's one of those where, here's a question, answer it. Here's a question, answer it. We don't do any of that, which is great. I mean, we do ask questions, but before we ask any questions, I want to thank our sponsor for this week, Reaper's Brew Coffee. That's right, reapersbrew.com. Check them out. Veteran-owned company, horror-themed company. They have some really cool mugs. They have shirts. They have a whole bunch of things. And if you use Mando at checkout, M-A-N-D-O, you get 10% off of new orders, plus you receive a free gift. So check them out, reapersbrew.com. All right. Now let's get down to chatting for a while. So our guest is easier. Our guests will introduce themselves to us, Chuck, and then we will not introduce ourselves to them, and they will just have no idea who we are. That's kind of how this works every month. I realize we do that, right?
We're not really interesting, so
right. Everybody knows
more
who we
important
are,
to talk to the guests.
Cares exactly. So can we start it out?
Are we starting with me?
Yes.
I am Mack Little. I'm a author of horror and historical romance novels. My first novel is Progeny. It's a coming-of-age story where, it's just a coming-of-age story. And the historical romance is Daughter of Hades. And it's a story where people from diverse backgrounds all come together and help each other out and have a swashbuckling adventure.
Sounds great. I'm V.S. Holmes. I am a sci-fi fantasy author. I have two series. My first fantasy series was The Blood of Titans, which is sort of titanic powers and gods, and then of course the humans, or mostly humans, that are caught in the crossfire of that war. And then the Star's Edge No Bentley series, which is my science fiction, and that's more fast-paced lesbian archaeologists in space. And I'm currently working on book 5 in that.
Wow.
So you both write, obviously, in not just one genre, which is cool. So how does that, for you, how does that different when you're initially setting it up, when you're doing the research, and when you first started? Was it when you jumped from, like, say, horror to romance, was it tough to get your head around of, is this going to work? Will there be fans for both? Will there be, just two separate fan bases? Like, what was the mindset?
Well, basically, when I write what I want to read. And when I started out, I wanted to write about a kick-ass vampire slayer. And in the course of doing that, basically all of my genres overlap. I just pick out the most prominent themes in the books and then call it that. And when I was writing my horror book, Progeny, I had a whole storyline that took place in ancient Yemen and Ethiopia, and I really dug getting into the history and the politics and the culture of the time and picking up these tidbits of information that most people haven't heard about. And I was like, oh, I want to do this for a whole novel. So, when I heard about the Maroons, the freed slaves in Jamaica and their battle against the English, and I thought, oh, I want to write about that and, turn into a great pirate adventure. But it also has elements of magical realism because I deal with some of the African religions. I bring that in. So I have witches and whatnot in my historical romance. So it all kind of blurs together. And there's a romance in my horror book, and I wanted to focus more on that too. So, one kind of feeds into the other.
Makes sense.
My to be read list just got longer, it sounds like. So
Yeah, exactly.
I honestly started writing. I started writing fantasy because that's what I was most familiar with reading, and then I kind of needed a palate cleanser. Writing, at least for me, is like super slow. So I'm, stuck in like the big world building, these sort of sweeping epics. And I wanted something that was, jokes on me, short and simple that I could just like finish one book. And that was my sci-fi. And then, of course, by the end of that, I'm like, oh, just kidding. That's actually the longer series. But for me, it was, I can't, like, if I get bogged down in one storyline, I want to be able to keep writing and keep that creative flow so I don't, completely get writer's block. But it needs to be a very different story so I don't lose the threads or confuse them. And I find my tone and my writing process is different enough between the different genres that I can kind of bounce back and forth most of the time.
Can I jump in?
Sure.
Your only question, though, you're allowed, Chuck.
All right, it's got to be a good one. It sounds like there's a lot of depth to the stories that you're both creating, and so I guess the question that comes to my mind is, do you start with a lot of research, or do you kind of conceptualize and begin the story and then research as you go? I guess talk about the writing process as you're doing, like Mack, you said when you were researching, Yemen and the Caribbean and all that stuff. But VS, from the world building aspect of the science fiction and the fantasy, does that start first, or is it kind of like the theme and the story and the characters, and then as you go, you're building the world? I guess talk about that part of the creative process.
Yeah, so I start with the character. All of my work is character driven, and for my main characters, I have a very detailed character sheet that goes on for like 40 pages. I know what they carry in their pockets, and so I know their history, and and during the development of the character, I kind of know where I want them to go and how I want them to end up. So when I begin to write the story, I do my research as I go, and I let my research inform me of what the plot is gonna be. So for historical occurrences to happen, I check in with my character, see how it affects my character, how they react to it, and how they navigate through that historical, event. Like, for instance, one of my characters is based on an African called Busa, who led a slave revolt in Barbados. And so I kind of integrated his story into my story, and used some of the events that happened during his revolt, in my revolt. So, and that's how I figured out, the minutia of, who was involved, how it affected the entire island and the people involved with it. So yeah, I research and do plotting by the seat of my pants. Okay. My characters tell me where to go. My research tells me where to go, because I want to be, I try to be as accurate as possible.
Braver than me. That's why I won't touch history. For me, like with my fantasy, it's third world fantasy, so it doesn't take place in this world, and there is magic to some extent. So I sort of feel like I can kind of do what I want. One of the rules of sci-fi fantasy is like you can make up your rules as long as you follow them consistently throughout the books. So I try to be a little bit more flexible with my research with that. I do look up certain things like sieges and some military conflicts, like you were talking about with your revolt, to try and incorporate some of those details, and medical details and stuff with battlefield injuries. But that's usually afterwards. I'll try and do like a sort of a chaos draft. I'll try and write the bulk of the plot and the characterizations, and then I'll use asterisks in my work to be like, okay, research this, research that. I mean, if it's a huge plot point that's going to change like physics or something in science fiction, I will look it up first. But I usually do my small research things when I go through my revisions. I tend to like get sucked down the rabbit hole of research, especially like fascinating YouTube videos with history and military conflicts and science. So I have to wait to do that. Otherwise, I'll probably never finish the books.
Yeah, that's why I asked, because I know I have a tendency to go down many rabbit holes, and then I get distracted from the writing process. So I'm always looking for that shortcut or the cheat sheet. So I was trying to steal from you, what works for you so that I can use it for my own benefit, because I'm kind of like that. So
the asterisk thing like saved my butt, because I got so bogged down doing my first 2 fantasy books, and it'll even be something like asterisk, spaceship name, asterisk date, asterisk character name, and as long as I remember which character I'm referring to, it's fine.
Yeah. Cool. That's always been my hang up is, I need a name, or I did this the other day. I needed a specific date for something, and then literally I'm on going, okay, so good, Johnny Depp's first band is on Spotify now, and I had the album, so I download and I'm listening to it, and I'm like, what am I supposed to be doing while I'm sitting here? Oh, I'm supposed to be researching and I went just totally in the weeds on it for like an hour. I lost, and it was literally look up a date, but
Right.
my mind wanders. I'm a total pantser, so there's no outline for me. I'm just writing. So, are you outliners or are you just pantsers?
I'm a definite pantser. I mean, I've tried outlining, and my character, since my books are character driven, my characters tell me where to go, and every time I try to plot out what's going to happen, they go in a totally different direction. But to what you're speaking to is like going down rabbit holes and getting distracted while you're writing. When I'm writing, this is like an anathema to most writers, but I have the television going on in the background, and I have specific television shows that are specific to what I'm writing. Like when I'm writing my romance novel, I'm watching Black Sails and The Expanse and Outlander. I just have them in the background, and when I reach a knot in the story where I can't figure things out, I just look at television, and then I go back to my writing, and then it comes, and that actually helps me with the dialogue too, listening to them talk in the background. So I find that helpful. My husband thinks I'm crazy.
yeah.
I listen to music and like lyrical music sometimes, not always. But like I assume they're the episodes like you've already seen, right? Like you.
Oh yeah, I've seen The Expanse like 10 times. Every season I rewatch all the seasons. I've read all the books. I've listened to all the audio tapes. So yeah, it's all regurgitated. So I don't really. It's white noise basically until I just look up.
That makes more sense.
Yeah, if I listen to music, I'll be singing along. I like to sing along, so that wouldn't work. I can't sing and write.
I don't think the people in my house would like it if I started singing along. I used to be. I mean, like the first few books I wrote, I pantsed them because like I didn't know what I was doing. I just sort of like went into it. And I wasn't like doing it intentionally. It was like, oh, I'm supposed to be working on this essay. I think I'll write a novel instead. And then when I tried to, when I switched over to doing it professionally, and I was like, oh, I have to be like a real writer. So I must outline. And I did that for a couple years. And I guess it was 2020, I had sort of an utter writer's mental breakdown and just completely stopped outlining. I had written one of Heretics, my most recent book, entirely on this like hard outline, like down to like planning out the paragraphs, and it was the worst book I'd ever written. And so I had to go back and restart the whole thing and rewrite it, pantsing it. So now I pants, but I do have an outline like phase in that like revision phase. So I'll sort of like do the chaos draft, the pantsing of the first draft. And then, yeah, once I get to know my characters, once I know what the heck's going to go on in the book, then I will go through and I'll have like an outline. And that's mostly to make sure like I'm hitting the right beats for my genre and I'm tying up all the loose ends because unlike you, Mac, you're very smart. You have like character documents and stuff. I do not have that.
But also I use Scrivener, so it creates an outline for me as I go along, so I can go back and look at get an overview of what I've written, like you. I use that outline to help me figure out plot holes and continuity and stuff like that.
Yeah, Scrivener's a great tool. Because I travel for work, I try to, it doesn't work on my Chromebook. I'll use Google Drafts for like my chaos draft or like my word vomit. And then when I go in to do my revisions, I switch to Scrivener. And then I switch to Word because I like pain, I guess.
You can't write it in Word. You know, is it even worth writing a book, you know?
No. You can format it in Word, but
yeah.
Yeah, Word is, I have the same issue. I love Scrivener because it gives you kind of the boundaries that you need. And I used to live religiously by the outline too, at one point until I started, I guess, feeling more confident in my voice, which Armand had helped me find. And then I was able to still use an outline, but it's very high level because, like you said, BS, like I don't want to pants it to the point where I just go off on a tangent and then never come back. So I want to make sure I hit those beats and go where I need the story to go, but then I can have the character surprise me along the way. So, but yeah, it's always interesting to hear how other people do it. It sounds like not too many people use the outline process, or not so strictly anymore. You know, the more and more people that we talk to, it sounds like everybody becomes pantsers at some point.
I noticed that too, like in the last like 3 years or so. Maybe it's that like we've realized life has no structure either. So
That's a good point.
Yeah. It's funny what you say about your confidence though, and how you started trusting yourself to know the story more. And I wonder if that was part of why like I went back and forth. It's like I was too silly to know that I didn't have the confidence or whatever when I was first writing. So I was like, yeah, I'll just write whatever. And then I got like imposter syndrome and had to outline everything religiously.
Oh, so you're over imposter syndrome. See, I still have it after how many years now.
Totally
Yeah,
over it.
We still talk about that every episode.
Every other episode, we're talking about imposter syndrome.
I wasn't staring at my work in progress like this weekend weeping. No, that totally wasn't me.
Oh, okay, all right. How about I'm going to throw a different type of question out. So it's like multiple choice. So let's see.
B, always B.
Well, I'm not going to put letters attached to it, but what do you find most challenging about the creative process, and specifically in your writing? Is it time management, editing and rewriting, or something else? So there's the parameters, and I'll let you decide who wants to respond first.
I love editing.
Well, as far as time management goes, I have a day job, and when I'm done with my day job, I work at home. I go outside, I smoke a cigar, and I write my novel longhand for 3 hours.
Wow.
Every single day, even on the weekends.
Beautiful.
And if I don't write, I start having anxiety attacks about not writing. So it's not really time management, and I really dig editing because it's already written. I don't have to come up with anything. So I guess coming up with the initial story is the hardest part, and keeping it within the parameters. I mean, I have specific plot points that I wanna hit, and just creating the story and getting to those points without going off on a tangent is probably my biggest challenge.
Yeah, I think time management, I don't have a writing schedule like you do. Mostly because I got very burnt out trying to do that. And I sort of write when I feel like it now, which is like blasphemy. I do not write every day. I am lucky if I write multiple times a week. But honestly, I think my writing is better when I do it that way. I would say my biggest challenge is untangling like the initial threads when I get to like the back third of the book and remembering like which book I'm writing. It's happened multiple times that I have been staring at a draft thinking like, what is wrong with this? I don't know why it's so tangled. I know what has to happen. I know how we get there. I don't know why this isn't working. And it turns out I'm writing the next book in the series, not the book I'm supposed to be writing. And that's very, I mean, on one hand, it's nice because then I have like 20,000 words of the next book already written.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's hard to figure that out. So I think finishing the book, not so much like, writing the end, but finishing it, getting it untangled and getting that last part really smoothed out is probably one of my biggest challenges, because it's hard when you have so many ideas and when you're writing a series to keep it going and make sure like each one has its own wrap up.
Yeah, and also finding that balance with the character's growth, but still staying true to the character's personality and stuff. Especially on a longer series, you start to at least I find myself sometimes going back and I'm like, I don't know, would he really do that or say that? In some instances, yes, because he's different now, but I think it becomes harder, which is funny because I find it easier to write series than standalones, but I think it becomes more of a challenge to keep that consistency across the series in terms of, the characters and who they are, and because they are going to grow and change, but how much? I guess that's the question.
That's a good point. Like would this character say that? Like, yes, but it depends on when you ask or when you're writing. That's a very good point.
Now with obviously you're both doing series. Is there from the beginning? Okay, this is going to be X number of books, or is it going to be I'm just going to write until I'm done with my ideas in this series?
Yeah, I'm going to write until I'm done. My Vampire Hunter series I love my characters there, and I just can't let them go. And now that I'm writing my historical romance, I try not to go over 100,000 words, and my novels get long because I want to, follow each of my characters. So what I do is I plot out novellas for some of my characters, and the main storyline I just keep continuing. So it could be a plenitude of books for both of them.
Now, are most of because of romance, I know romance series tend to be like a series of standalones, like within the same universe, but each couple or whatever has their own story sort of wrapped up. Does that help you with, I know I'm like asking questions that are trying to.
But yeah.
Does that help you with like just keep going because you can just?
Well, basically the stories I'm finding overlap. So my romance novel is about two set of siblings. A brother and sister, twins, escape slavery from Barbados. Two brothers escape religious persecution as Huguenots in France and become indentured servants. And so their lives become intertwined, and I'm following romances for each of the siblings. So theoretically, there are 4 books, but there could be more.
That's cool.
Yeah. So, but as I'm writing the second installment, I've noticed there's overlap because the last climax issues, events that happened in the last book still affect the main characters, and they're dealing with that as we're passing the baton off to some other romance. So, sorry. I hope that's not too long.
To answer that question, I don't know it's a series until usually the first book is almost done. I have like the notorious problem of like, oh, this is going to be a standalone. No, just kidding. Here's so many books. And usually once I realize, oh, I think this is going to be a series, I'm not going to wrap this story up. And I start to realize like why I'm not going to wrap it up in just a single book, like some of the main beats that I really want to hit and the main scenes. Then I'll sort of get an idea for how many books in the series are going to be there. But I do try and leave some wiggle room, especially with my sci-fi series. Like there are so many parts of the world that I want to explore and side characters that I might do like the little novella, shoot-offs and things like that. But usually by the time the first book is done, I know it's going to be a series, but I often don't go into something planning it to be a series, which at this point I just should, because they all turn into series.
Yeah,
Now, is there a tendency, because we're all creative people, so we all have a billion ideas. Is there that tendency of, okay, I'm working on these two series, but this other idea over here is driving me nuts, but I know I'm supposed to finish one or both of these two series first before I go to this third one? Are you playing in the third one?
Kinda. As I'm researching pre-colonial Africa, I'm developing like this fantasy with kingdoms with Afrofuturism type plot going on in it. So I would love to write a fantasy with kingdoms set in Africa.
That would be so cool. We need more of that. I have my like sandbox playground. I have a few documents. When I'm on like deadline and I really need to finish something and I know my editor's waiting for it, I try to not play in the sandbox, just for time management purposes. But I did find, so sort of accidentally, when I was doing the chaos rewrite of my fourth book in my sci-fi series, I was also simultaneously just like throwing words at the screen in this other like separate document, which was different from anything else, unrelated to any of my worlds, a different type of fantasy than I usually write. And after like 2 months, I realized that I had written twice as many words in that than in any of my other stuff. I was writing faster than I usually do. And that sort of is what tipped me off to like, I really do need to have multiple projects to bounce between to keep that creativity flowing. Because I don't think I could have written the other book as well if I wasn't like, well, I want to go play over here. So I usually do. Lately because I've been burnt out, I haven't really been doing it as much. Maybe I should. Now that I just said that. But then usually those end up becoming like, that's what my science fiction book series started out as, like, oh, I'm just going to go over here and play in the sandbox, and then 6 books later, oops.
Yeah, I think I've struggled with bouncing between different series. I started out that way and it seemed to work initially, but then I guess my mind couldn't separate, and I was writing very different things. So I was writing a supernatural Western horror series and then a crime thriller series at the same time. So it was very different. So you would think it would be easy, but I had difficulties going back and forth, and Armand and I used to go back and forth about, because he could on this, basically on the drop of a dime, just start writing a story, and get into new characters and into, a whole new world and stuff. But that's why he's my mentor, because he's much more versed than I am. But these days, I think I'm heading back towards that in that you kind of need some kind of that soundboard to bounce things off, because you get very stuck in your ways sort of in a certain series if you're just highly focused on it. But then the downside is then I wonder, or I worry, well, if I'm not finishing the series, am I going to croak before this thing finishes? You know, like I don't want to be a Robert Jordan Wheel of Time. My wife still complains about that years later. You know, I read all these books and I'm never going to know, and I don't want to do that to the readers. But you almost need like that chance to step away and do something different.
The trick is to just always be super slow with your books, so no one expects anything else. Apparently, I don't know.
There's the secret.
I try, but then the money doesn't seem to come, and everybody talks about you got to be fast so that the money comes fast, and
You're in this
so
for money?
no, I mean,
No, I know.
I mean we've been writing since we were younger,
Yeah.
all along, but you know I think everybody, or at least our dreams, are to be like full-time writers. Armand is. I'm not there yet. You know, I was at one point, but had to go back and get a 9-to-5. So, you know, I'd love to be in that spot again.
I just find if I have, like, on my board behind me, there's like 14 open projects right now that I'm working, and I like that. I like being able to get up in the morning and having my cup of coffee, and at 10 o'clock saying, I'm going to work on one of my crime thrillers. And then after lunch, I'm going to work on a horror book. And then I'm going to work on this short story or that short story. And for me, it's sometimes working on 3 or 4 different, completely different projects and just jumping right back in, you know, that spot. For me, that's the fun and the challenge. You know, 3 days a week, I write live on Twitch and I start a short story. So literally, I only have the title. And a lot of times, I literally have a blank document up and I have no idea. I don't even have a title at that point. I'm kind of looking around my office going, give me something, give me a title or give me something, or I'll pull Spotify and look at a song title or something. And I'm throwing something up there, and then I'm literally creating while people are watching me live. I'm creating a short story. And that over the last 7 or 8 months, that has really, really helped me to just focus and not be so concerned and worried about, oh, what's the next word? What's the next perfect word? You know, I always say to myself, and Chuck, you've heard this a million times, I'm a pulp fiction author. I'm not Hemingway. I'm not writing the great American novel here. I'm writing about people being mean to each other is pretty much what it comes down to. So why take this so seriously for me? I just need to get, you know, my words in every day. I need to write, and I need to get this. But I'm also looking at it and I'm saying my end game here in another year or two is not to have to write 400 and 500,000 words for the year. To as my sales have gone up, as my crime thriller stuff is doing better and better and better every day, the numbers are great. I'm able to pay my bills doing this. At some point I go, you know what? I'm not going to write 12 books a year. I'm going to write 5 books or 6 books a year for me. You know, and even that, people are like, 6 books is still a lot, but it's still, you know, not burning myself out. I'm not getting to that point where this is a job. You know, I think that's it. We're creative people because this is what we have to do. You know, I say to a lot of authors that Chuck and I know, and I said, you know, if your day is you'd rather lay around and read, you'd rather take naps all day, rather than you'd rather sit and write or be creative, and not even the physical writing, just in your head, the writing, thinking of your stories, thinking of your characters, you know, what are their next things for them? That's somebody who wants to be a writer, and it's not about the money and all that stuff. All that stuff hopefully comes at some point or comes later on. But for me, I have to write every day, or I'm in a mood, or you know, and I don't care if it's I literally wrote 100 words. I kind of cheat over on my other computer, and I just write 100 words, and I'm like, you know what, I wrote today. I can write down that I wrote 102 words today, and I'm happy with that. And then there's just days where I can hit 5,000 words in a day, and I'm just as happy. So I mean, that's kind of thing. So for you, at what point did you say, okay, maybe, you know, growing up I have these ideas, but at one point do you say, you know what, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be a writer. I'm going to try to get